Hey everyone and welcome. Goal achievement is a science, productivity is a science, and its mastery is a skill that allows you to achieve any other goal or acquire any other skill. Like my friend Fox, who was a chronic procrastinator up until he watched my procrastination masterclass, after which he gained the skill of beating procrastination. By the end of this masterclass, you will have a clear overview of the process of productivity systematization as well as how to achieve it as a college student to create a base for a solid productivity system that actually enables you to achieve your goals effectively. If you don't develop this skill, you'll be stuck in a loop of inconsistent progress, burnout, and eventual failure. I'm Doji, a medical graduate and productivity academic. I specialize in helping college students go from overwhelmed by procrastination and inconsistency to masters of productivity capable of achieving their goals, both personal and academic, efficiently. So let's jump right into the masterclass. I want you to watch it till the very end and listen very carefully. Okay, so the first point I want to discuss is a major reason of why most college students fail to achieve most of their goals, right? So, and as an example here, we're going to take Bob, right? Bob is a very ambitious college student. So he wants to do well academically. He wants to maybe work out, get in shape. He wants to read books for self-improvement or for his knowledge or whatever. He wants to do a lot of things in general, right? He wants to be productive. But the issue is Bob's progress is as follows. He's not really used to doing much. Maybe he's here, or not really in this year state, maybe here actually, right? So what happens is Bob gets a burst of motivation, right? Motivation. Let's just sum it up because it's hard to write in this whiteboard. Uh, Actually, let's write it whole. Motivation. Okay. And he actually is able to work on these goals for maybe, um, maybe one day, maybe actually two, maybe three. But the thing is, eventually he goes back. So maybe not even a few days, maybe a few weeks even, but eventually he goes back. So he's in this constant cycle of making ambitious plans and then staying consistent with these goals for a few days based on a burst of motivation and then declining back to baseline, or actually maybe even below baseline. Maybe eventually he falls back into a rut in which he does nothing at all. So what happens then? He musters or he gets some motivation. So what happens? Again, he goes, he does very, very well for a few days, a few weeks, whatever, and then he eventually drops back. So it's almost a never-ending cycle that makes you lose hope in achieving your potential. Like you know you have it in you, but you keep almost um you keep going back on what you said you will be consistent on. And this cycle just continues forever. And the reason this cycle continues forever and the way to deal with it is actually to address what I call the unholy trinity, right? The unholy trinity of productivity, of goal achievement, whatever, you name it. And this unholy trinity consists of three majorly misunderstood and employed or utilized or underutilized aspects of emotion or productivity or whatever. And one of these is motivation, as we just said, and the other two are willpower and brute forcing. Now, let's take each one of these in order and explain the dynamics of how it works, as well as how we can employ it to create a solid productivity system that would actually help us be consistent and achieve our goals. So let's start with motivation, right? So the thing about motivation is that you can't really rely on it. You can't really depend on motivation, because if you depend on motivation, you'll be like Bob. You'll get a burst of motivation, be consistent for a few days, and then eventually you'll just slide back into your old routines. Once this motivation, wait, hold on. Once this motivation fades out. So this is the point at which motivation essentially decays. So it just doesn't last forever, right? And this is the first thing you have to understand about motivation. Motivation is something that fluctuates by nature. And this is a study published in PNAS, you name it, in the field of psychological and cognitive sciences that entailed the fluctuation of motivation as a core human trait. So you can never rely on it being there all the time. So what you can deduct out of that is if you
base your ambitions or your progress or whatever based on motivation, which is just an emotion, a fear emotion that, although strong, is actually temporary. If you do that, you're destined to fail and be stuck in this miserable cycle, right? And this is, again, this is an illustration of that loop, and how your progress probably looks like if you're someone who relies on motivation. Okay, so now that we understand that motivation is not really the solution to consistent productivity and making consistent progress towards your goals, what do we do about that? We replace motivation with consistency. What's the difference between motivation and consistency? Motivation is an emotion that is, although is strong, is actually temporary, right? But consistency is lasting. It is not temporary. It lasts. Um, Motivation comes and goes, comes and goes. Consistency means stability, right? Motivation, actually, let me separate those two real quick. Finally, motivation is an emotion, right? You can't really control it. You can't really create it on demand, as this study shows. Consistency, on the other hand, is engineered. Like, there is a process to creating consistency. Like, it is a process with rules and with dynamics. It's a blueprint, right? So this is as far as motivation is concerned. Now, I'm not going to go into deep detail onto how to engineer consistency. I've actually touched on that in my previous procrastination masterclass, if you're interested, which you can find in the description below or somewhere around. But I'm not going to go into everything in detail in this masterclass because it's going to be a sort of a meta guide on how to direct yourself um, when it comes to productivity systematization, right? So this is as far as motivation is concerned. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is willpower or discipline. Something that also a lot of college students complain about so often, so often. What do they say? They say, I don't have discipline, right? Or I don't have willpower. They're essentially the same thing. Like they're interchangeable. Like they're yeah, essentially the same thing. So willpower and discipline, we'll just refer to them as whatever, really. So a lot of students complain about not having discipline or willpower, and that also um hints to how they don't understand the dynamics of discipline, just as they don't understand the dynamics of motivation, right? Because, by the way, with motivation as well, you find people literally asking in forums and such, like, guys, can you give me some motivation? Can someone motivate me to do something? Can someone encourage me to do something? Can I really, um, I want to study hard those few days. Can someone send me some motivating quotes or speeches or whatever? Brother, it does not work like that. You can't just force it. And even if these things like motivational quotes or speeches or videos or whatever work, they're not sustainable. It's just a burst that'll fade out eventually. Now, the same thing can be, we can say the same thing about willpower or discipline, but not exactly in that it is fluctuating and unreliable, as in the case of motivation, but it also has its own dynamics that we need to respect. So, I want to shed light on a few studies. The first one is called the Marshmallow test, and the Marshmallow test is essentially they wanted to torture kids for whatever reason, so they just brought them in and put them in a room and placed them in front of one marshmallow, right? And they told them, if you wait for 10 minutes, I'm going to come back and give you two marshmallows if you don't eat that marshmallow in front of you. So essentially testing if kids will practice delayed gratification and actually refrain from eating the marshmallow in front of them, um, in exchange for getting two marshmallows if they delay that gratification. And the thing is, obviously, some kids failed, some kids passed, and this study has a lot of like conclusions and speculations about it. But the thing I want to focus on here is how the kids who did not eat the marshmallow actually made it through. And the answer is they refrained from engaging with the act of resisting eating the marshmallow. So, what do I mean by this? If I'm a kid in front of the marshmallow right now and I'm looking at it, I'm trying so hard not to eat it. By doing that, I'm actually exerting willpower. these were the kids who mostly failed. The ones who succeeded were the ones who distracted themselves, who looked away, who kind of sang around, who didn't give it any attention. Like they were kind of disengaging from the act of resisting the marshmallow. I hope I'm making sense. So what that sheds light on is that willpower is something you do not want to use. You do not want to get yourself to use. I'll elaborate on that in a minute after we take a look at the other study, which is a study that coined the term ego depletion. And this was conducted by Roy Baumeister, which is one of the biggest names in the psychology of willpower. He has a book actually called Willpower. It's called just that. So what this study, how this study was engineered, first off, they brought some people, and it's a bit complicated, so stay with me. So they got them to sit in a room, and some people were offered chocolate chip cookies, and some people had chocolate chip cookies in front of them, but were told to eat I forgot what this was called. Give me a minute. Yeah, radish, my bad. I never ate it in my life. I literally don't even know how it tastes, so I had to look it up. So anyway, a group was offered chocolate chip cookies, and another group was offered chocolate chip cookies and radish, and was asked to resist the chocolate chip cookies and eat radish. So essentially, they exerted some willpower. And finally, a group that wasn't offered anything at all. Now, after that, each of the three groups were asked to solve a puzzle, and the puzzle was actually impossible to do. Right? It was an impossible puzzle. Well, the thing is, they wanted to measure how much each group would persist in trying to solve the puzzle. And the result was, it was surprising in back then, but in the light of what we're talking about right now, it is actually natural. So the cookies and the ones who were offered chocolate chip cookies and the ones who were offered nothing lasted for about 19 minutes, 19, but the radish group lasted for only 8 minutes. That is less than half. Now, what does this shed light on? It's the same principle we talked about with the kids that distracted themselves, that did not use willpower, that were not actively engaging with the marshmallow or actively resisting it, right? Because what happened is the chocolate chip cookies group didn't have to use willpower for anything, right? They were offered some tasty treat and they just ate it, right? And the control group, who wasn't offered anything, also didn't use willpower really, right? But the radish group was asked to resist chocolate chip cookies. So do not eat it. You're not allowed to. Obviously, the control group had neither, so they didn't use willpower at all. But this group needed to use willpower to resist the chocolate chip cookies. And what did that lead to? They had less willpower reserves for the next task. And this is the term of ego depletion, or the idea of the active self being the limited resource. What that means is, don't think of willpower as a character trait, as someone who has a lot of willpower, or someone who has, what else do they call it? They call it discipline, right? So don't think of it that way, that someone is disciplined while someone is not at all, right? Obviously, there are different natural differences in the levels of discipline between people, but that's not really the core of it. So what you want to think of it as is, willpower is a tank. And the people who work with this knowledge better are the ones who succeed, right? So what does that mean? Willpower is a tank is in those kids who did not try to actively resist the marshmallow, they eventually failed. Why? Because they kind of depleted the tank, if that makes sense. What about these? They had already, the radish group, what happened in the radish group experiment? They had already used this much of their willpower, were just resisting the chocolate chip cookies. Now, all what remained was this much. That was what remained for the puzzle that they were then asked to solve, right? So while these two other groups had the whole tank to use just for the puzzle. I hope I'm making sense. What I'm trying to say is, do not think of willpower or discipline as a trait. Think of it as a depletable resource. Okay, what does that mean really? What do we replace willpower with then? Like, we can't just engineer our lives upon having more willpower or building willpower, which we can do that, but that's not really the way to go about it. If you're thinking about long-term success and goal achievement, what you want to do is you want to replace having to use willpower with optimization, in which you don't have to use willpower to get through your day. So what that means is, Uh, um, another example is if you're someone who's trying to lose weight, right? Will you have chocolate chip cookies of these all around your house? Obviously not. Why? Because you can't expect yourself to have willpower all the time. Eventually, this tank will just run out and you're just going to submit to it. You're just going to give up to it, right? So do not set up your environment so that you have to use willpower to get work done, right? So obviously, a big example of this, which is something we all do, when you want to study and you're serious about it, what do? Do you put your phone in front of you and say, I'm just gonna try so hard not to open my phone? No, what you do is you put your phone in another room, you hand it to your mom or dad, maybe, you shut it off, whatever it is. You disengage from the possibility of engaging with your phone. I hope that makes sense. So what that does is you don't actually have to exert effort into resisting using your phone. So you have more willpower reserves. You obviously you don't do that with that in mind. Maybe you don't really have like the times you did that, you didn't really know this is how it worked, but that's just how it is, right? You set the phone aside so that you can direct your willpower reserves only to the task at hand, which is studying or whatever. So the solution to building willpower or relying on willpower or discipline is to optimize your environment so that you don't have to use or exert willpower or discipline. I hope I'm making sense. Also, dive deeper into that more in the future. Again, I can't make a full, like a productivity systematization, full masterclass. That will be like 10, 11 hours. That is a meta guide, as I told you, to direct you. Now, the third thing, and I'm also going to give you, um, actually, there's a video link in the description, which will discuss the dynamics of willpower on a deeper level, right? So it's an important video that you watch if you want to, you know, understand the dynamics of willpower better so that you can make a better productivity system and make progress towards your goals better in the light of how it actually works, right? And finally, what we have is brute forcing. Now, I don't have any studies in this because this is logic, really, right? So let's say we have two um, computer engineers. We have, say, angry, let's call him Bob as well, angry Bob and Tom, right? Now, angry Bob he's not really a competent computer engineer. He doesn't really know what he's doing, right? He has no knowledge of how computers work. And let's take angry Bob first, right? Angry Bob has all the parts of the computer in front of him, and his goal is to build a computer out of these parts. Now, if Bob just tries so hard to build this computer without any knowledge of how to actually build a computer, he simply won't. So he'll try to, but he'll fail, right? He'll fail at it. Now, he might not perceive this failure very lightheartedly. So he might get angry. He might get angry, right? He might get frustrated. So what happens is this fuels another trial. So he tries again eventually with more resolve. And Bob really wants to get this done. Like, he's not playing around, but he really wants to build this computer. So he's frustrated and he's angry. And with so much resolve, he plans on trying again to build the computer. Okay, what will happen on this other time in this next try? He'll also fail again. So more anger, more frustration, another trial. What happens? He fails again. What does this remind you? What does this remind you of? Let me tell you. It reminds me of this graph here, or this graph here, that you try harder at achieving your goals or working on your goals and you fail. So you make plans to make up for it, or you'll retry that with result to just try harder and hopefully things go better this time, right? And guess what? You fail again and you're just stuck in this cycle. This is just what we were talking about now. So this is Angry Bob, right? Now let's take Tom, the example of Tom, on the other hand. Now, Tom is also a computer engineer, but what distinguishes him from Angry Bob is that he's actually competent. He's actually competent. He knows how to build a computer. So what does Tom do? He builds, he builds it. That's it. He builds the computer. No frustration needed. No resolve needed. And again, Bob was serious about it. Like he was actually motivated to do it and he wanted to do it and he built up the resolve but that didn't help him because he was trying harder at nothing he didn't understand the dynamics of, right? What does Tom do? Tom doesn't need much motivation, really. He doesn't need that much willpower. He doesn't need that much motivation. He doesn't need these things because he knows how to build the computer, probably very efficiently if he's competent enough. You see? So what I'm trying to say is do not brute force it. Understand the process and the dynamics of productivity are complex and they're multidimensional. So you can't, there's no quick fix, buddy. There's no quick tip. There's no quick tip to make you consistent forever or to make you actually achieve your goals efficiently without burning out. Like there's this concept, you have to completely remove this concept from your mind. That's almost like Angry Bob after the third or fourth failed trial, opening up Reddit or YouTube or Facebook or whatever and asking, guys, I'm feeling this so badly. Can someone offer me any tip or tricks or whatever so that I can build a computer? And brother, it is not a tip or a trick. You have to learn the whole thing, right? It's a whole science essentially. Maybe not so much in the light of building a computer, but productivity is like motivation is a science. Willpower is a science. Consistency is a science. Habit engineering and habit building is a science. All of these are sciences, right? There are books on each tiny subject of these. So instead of brute forcing, understand. Instead of brute forcing, you have to have what? You have to have mastery. You have to actually master these dynamics by creating a productivity system, right? So a productivity system is actually kind of a vague word. So let me just define real quick the aspects of what create a productivity system. First off, you have the mindset and principles upon which the system is set. So that would be something like actually all of what we're discussing right now, that contributes to this point, right? Something like the willpower, for example. This is a principle that you have to understand right, and you have to understand the dynamics of right if you're planning to build a functional, successful productivity system, right? So this is part of it. Another part is the skill of habit engineering or having a habit engineering framework that allows you to build habits consistently and increase the threshold um, of your output with these habits. And the 4 stages I've defined in my procrastination masterclass, which again you can get from the link in the description, is a very powerful masterclass. Are 1, procrastination. That's the very first level. So at the very first level of the building a habit, you procrastinate. So you just have to break that initial barrier first. And then consistency, in which you've broken the barrier of procrastination, but now you want to be consistent with it. Then productivity, or being productive as in doing that habit for longer hours or for longer time or with a greater output. And then finally, efficiency, which is getting more for less or doing in 1 hour what you used to do in 2 hours. So that's it. Really quickly, again, there's a more in-depth guide about this one in particular in my procrastination masterclass. And finally, not finally, my bad. These are actually the main pillars. Like they don't constitute the whole thing, but these are the main and most important pillars. And then comes environmental optimization, both physical and digital, because an optimized environment works with, where was it? With your willpower tank, right? So you can reserve your willpower tank and actually put in the work. You don't want to be someone who who wakes up and resists using his phone every day, right? So you don't want to be someone by the time like how do you say? Wait, hold on. By the time 1 hour, only 1 hour has passed from your day, you have already used this much of your willpower tank just resisting your phone because you've placed it next to you. So how do you optimize this? Obviously, and a lot of people actually do this. Place your phone in another room. Delete whatever social media apps are distracting you. Um, Shut it down, whatever it is. Just set your environment so that you don't have to exert willpower throughout the day, so that it's not a constant war with your distractions on a daily basis, so you can actually get to work easier and for longer without having it feel like hell, right? So this was the third part of it, which is environmental optimization, both physical and digital. And also there are like advanced skill sets that have to do with mastery, like having a strong, efficient tool set, be it digital or physical products or software like Notion, Obsidian, whatever it is, productivity apps and such, and knowing actually how to use it to streamline your work well. Psychomodulation, in which you actually modulate these aspects of motivation and willpower, and focus on demand. And again, I'd love to jump into each one of these, but everyone will take literally hours just dissecting it. So this is a meta guide, as I told you, and a lot of other things fall under this advanced skill set. And let me tell you something. I was actually working with someone who's a college student who also had a problem with procrastination. Right? This is what he told me. Um, when I asked him about what he thought of the procrastination masterclass, right? So he told me he used to approach procrastination with the mindset of, if just I could change my mindset, I'll beat this. So he treated procrastination as a mindset problem, and that if you're tough enough, or whatever, you might beat this. But the masterclass gave me a better idea of how to beat procrastination and how it actually worked. He goes by the name of Fox, right? Let's call him that for now, and how it actually worked. So, what does that remind you of? It reminds you of Angry Bob and Tom. So, Tom has had a perspective shift or a piece of knowledge that allowed him to know how computers work, so he could build them better. This is the example of how this person of Fox, he had a perspective shift. He had an addition in what part of the system? This part of the system, the mindset and principles part of the system, right? Which hopefully are scientific and not from forums or whatever. That's the right system, obviously. So he had a shift in this part of his productivity system, which allowed him to then take action differently. And that's the beauty of it. You add in bit by bit, piece by piece, you grow your blocks of the system, and eventually you'll see the exponential increase in your productivity and your consistency in making progress towards your goals, even if multiple at a time, right? And this is also what he had to tell me. Another one was um, someone who actually did cold calling, in which he called random people and offered them his services, as much as I understand. He had the exact same thing, so he was procrastinating on it. He wasn't really staying consistent with it, and the masterclass gave him kind of a perspective shift, which is again what part of the master of a productivity system this that then allowed him to make more calls and land in more leads. So what I'm trying to say is, do not brute force, do not try harder, because we know what the result of that is. You'll just be stuck in this cycle, right? Motivation, do some progress for a few days, then crash down. A rut, maybe a long rut, motivation, some progress, crash down. Motivation, um, some progress, crash down without really actually contributing to your goals at all in the bigger picture, right? So that's the result of brute forcing. Do not brute forcing. Instead, master the dynamics, learn about them. You can watch videos, you can read articles, you can read books, you can watch YouTube videos that are actually helpful, preferably ones that are in depth and not just some quick gibberish about some cinematic footage that supposedly motivates you or um, these shitty videos that are so well produced, but actually provide no real difference whatsoever. You get my point, hopefully. But the thing is, you have to master the dynamics of productivity and create a solid system instead of brute forcing it over and over. I hope I've made my points clear with those three aspects or three pillars of the unholy trinity. Now, what we've done now is we have, let's discuss the major takeaway. First off, this is a meta guide, so um, unlike the procrastination masterclass, there won't be really a solid practical takeaway, but this is, again, this works on this level, the mindset and principles level. So simply understanding these principles and internalizing them, that itself is you making progress. So what we've done is we've replaced the unholy trinity of motivation, willpower, and brute forcing with what? We've replaced motivation, which is, although theory, although strong, is temporary and unreliable, replaced it with consistency and mastery of the dynamics of consistency. We've replaced willpower with what? With optimization, so that you don't have to use willpower, because willpower is a finite resource. So we have to respect that. And finally, we've replaced brute forcing with actual mastery of the dynamics and the knowledge needed to create a solid productivity system that actually helps you achieve your goals efficiently. So in the end, what I want to tell you is you want to approach productivity as a scientist and not a caveman. And this has to do with the brute forcing part, right? Do not be a caveman. What does a scientist do? First up, a caveman brute forces. A caveman tries harder or relies on willpower and motivation, right? A scientist actually analyzes. A scientist studies and employs what he learns. A scientist reaches his goals systematically. You don't want to be someone who relies on willpower, or after having a crash or failing a test or cramming after you promised yourself you won't cram anymore and will actually study from day one. Won't be and actually make bigger plans based on motivation and just the resolve to change out of the blue, because willpower will eventually deplete and fade away. Motivation will eventually fade away. Brute forcing won't get you anyway, but it will actually get you deeper in this doom cycle of despair. So this alone is going to contribute to a mindset shift that will allow you to see things differently and work on things differently, starting from willpower, as we said, by optimizing your environment, for example. Again, a scientist, not a caveman. So what are the actionable steps? First off, watch the willpower video, which kind of goes into detail about the dynamics of willpower in the link in the description. And also you can watch the procrastination masterclass, very powerful, as I told you, which is essentially a protocol to overcome procrastination, create a solid studying system or productivity system within 3 days, as a primer. And finally, this video in itself was actually in actionable steps, because again, what did it contribute to this? I've underlined this so many times already to this part, but I don't want you to underestimate this part. So that was it. I hope you found value in this masterclass. Do not use willpower, buddy. You better block YouTube, block your phone distractions, delete Instagram, delete TikTok, whatever it is. But you can start doing that right away as a primer. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.